اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد
اللهم صل على محمد.
Okay, so today inshallah the topic is fake Muslim, and I think that as we're continuing inshallah taking these verses, it's important for us to understand that fake Muslims existed in the time of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, though they might be Muslims in reality, right? And we explained how that can be, that to be a Muslim is just to do what? Who remembers?
To say shahadatain.
That's it. Yeah, it's that simple, right? And so he said, the Prophet says, Al-Islamu iqrarun, meaning Islam is to just admit that Allah is just to testify, right? To admit that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no God but Allah, and that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi is his messenger. Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. However, we said that as we go through the verses, what we see is a clear distinction is being made between a Muslim and a believer in the general meaning, بالمعنى الأعم, and a believer in the specific meaning, بالمعنى الأخص, right? And now we're seeing a practical situation where just as we saw in every single verse, we're seeing now again a practical situation where a group comes to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, says, "Oh, we believed. What more do you want from us?" And Allah commands him to say, "No, say to them, قالت الأعراب آمنا قل." This is the commanding verb. قل. He says, say to them, right? لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. You didn't believe in reality. ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم, Allah says in this verse, say that you submitted, you admitted, you testified, but Iman never entered your hearts, right? And so that means then, as we said yesterday, Iman is a state of the heart, right? إلا من أتى الله بقلب سليم. The end of the road, the people who go to heaven are those who meet their Lord with a heart that is salim. Does anybody know what salim means, other than it being someone's name?
Doesn't it mean peace? Hold with peace?
Sure, peace is silm or salam. Salim comes from salama, right? So it's in the form of fa'il. What does it mean?
Satisfied.
Satisfied, sure, could mean that, but that's not exactly what is intended here in the verse. When I say, for example, to someone, when someone dies, I say to them, Yislam rasak, right? Aw inshallah btislamu. What does that mean?
Thankful?
Or do we just say it? We don't know what it means.
Like,
what was that, Muhammad?
Like you're thankful. When I say Yislamu, I mean like I'm thanking someone usually.
Okay, so that's one. Yislamu, thank you. But I'm saying if I'm going to give my condolences to someone, I say to them, Inshallah btislamu, right? Oh, Yislam rasak. What does that mean?
Is it like hoping that they find peace with the situation?
Actually, no, that's not what it means. Yeah.
Islam. Is it like mend or heal? Like I hope your hearts are healed or something like that?
That has something to do with it, yes. But it's more of a dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps them salimeen, meaning that it keeps them from harm. Okay, so if I am kept from harm, then salamt. Okay, salamt, meaning that I was able to either avoid harm or keep from harm. Okay, so when Allah says illa man ata Allah biqalbin salim, what he's saying is that except for those who come with a heart that has been protected and cleaned out and purified, right, from all sins, okay, from all insincerities, right? That a heart that is full of sincerity to Allah has no place for any insincerity, correct? So that's what a heart that is salim is, okay? so here then, it's important for us to understand that our end goal then is to actually reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a heart that is salim. And a heart that is salim is a heart that is full of iman, right? So the question is here, what are ways, like we know we have a lot of Muslims around us. Like one thing I wanted to address today, to be honest with you, is because the situation entails it, it's only prudent to mention it, because here we're seeing in the time of the Prophet, as one of my teachers says to me and reminds me all the time, and reminds his students all the time, that when we're looking at the riwayat, at the hadith, and at the verses of the Holy Qur'an, we always have to remember the context and when it was revealed and the time that it was revealed. And when these verses were revealed, during that time, it wasn't just like in our case, for example, where the Shia are in one end of the world or in one area of the world, and then the Sunnah are in the other end of the world, or in another city, or they have their own mosque, or we have our own mosque. It wasn't like that. Everybody was together, right? Everybody prayed behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you had those who truly believed in the Prophet and the successorship of Amir al-Mu'mineen. You had those who didn't, right? You had those who not just didn't, they believed that, that they were trying to figure out a way to take over after the Prophet died. And then you have those who were neither here nor there. They were just hypocrites, Then you have those who, were just completely unassuming. In actual fact, they weren't hypocrites. They didn't really care about leadership. They just wanted to, live. They wanted to live in peace. Like that's it, right? Then you had the Jews who were also living at the same time in Mecca, and you had the Christians also who were living at the same time in Mecca. So you had like a really diverse cosmopolitan society happening there. It wasn't, and you had the disbelievers, but those who stayed with Prophet Muhammad when Islam became strong, those were only the ones that were called kafir dhimmi. And a kafir dhimmi is a kafir that doesn't have any animosity and doesn't try to wreak havoc in society. He just pays the taxes he needs to pay, and by that he has the right to live amongst the Muslimin, just as long as and the same applies to the Kitabis too. Like if they're Jewish or they're Christian, the same tax would apply to them. They can just live peacefully with everybody without creating problems. But we know for a fact that during that time, problems were created by different groups, whether they were of the hypocrites or whether they were considered quote unquote close companions and were hypocrites, or people who are a little farther away that came on later on after the Prophet died, or towards the last year, like Abu Huraira, for example, who's a known narrator by the Sunni school of thought, who used to spend his day with Abu Sufyan, or his day with Prophet Muhammad and his night with Abu Sufyan. It was just very diverse, right? Kuffar were there, Zoroastrians were there, people from Persia, right, who believed in the God of light and the God of darkness, right? And then there were these atheists called Dahriyun. They believed that the world always existed and will always exist. So there were all kinds of people that existed at that time. It's not as straightforward as, for example, living in Dearborn, right? Where the majority of the population is Shia, right? And if you go to this mosque, it's Tabneen. If you go to this mosque, it's Bint Jbel. And if you go to this mosque, right, it's Kadhmiya. And if you go to this mosque, it's Samawa, right? So that means then that there had to be some way to decipher who was close and who was far. Because according to the contention of our Sunni brothers in their school of thought, a Sahabi is a person who just existed in the time of the Prophet. He didn't even have to see him. Okay? And Sayyid Murtada al-Askari, in his book, may Allah rest his soul, in his book, Ma'alim al-Madrasatain, which is actually translated, I believe, by Ansariyan Publishing. That's a good book to have in your library. He actually takes certain ideas and concepts and he explains each one from a Sunni standpoint and from a Shia standpoint. And then he tells you it's up to you to decide which makes more sense to you based on the evidence. Okay, so that's why that's a good book to have. If you have like Sunni friends, Haj Jamil, if you have Sunni friends, this is a good book to have. Okay, another good book to have when you're also dialoguing or talking with Sunnis, is a book called Al-Muraja'at. That's a really good book because this is basically a discussion that occurs between one of our great scholars and one of the Shia high scholars and one of the Sunnah high scholars, the highest scholar, Sunni scholar in Al-Azhar. These are two main books. If you're interested in going into dialoguing or understanding the differences, right? Whether it's an understanding terminology or understanding certain concepts or theology, I mean, theistic arguments, then these are two good books to go back to. A third book that's good to go back to, right? So that you have a good library in your home or on your phone is The Knights of Peshawar. That's actually a good one to have. A fourth one that's good to have is Then I Was Guided by Tijani, by Sayyid Tijani. That's a good one to have. And he has a series of them that have been translated. Ma'a Sadiqeen, with the truthful ones. He has another one called The Sunnah are the real, the Shia are the real Sunnah. Okay. So we've got a few here. Okay. I mean, depending on what you like. If you like something that's more of a novel-based story, I would go with Thumma Ihtadayt first, because it really shows his journey, you know, how he was a Sunni and how he later on became a Shia, right, and how that happened, okay? And he took a trip to Iraq and he met some Iraqi people he was on a ship, he met some Iraqi people, and then later on he took a trip to Iraq because they invited him, and it's a nice story, okay? If you're looking for something that's more kind of, you know, how do scholars address each other, Muraja'at is a really good one with a lot of evidence in there. If you want something that's more, let's say, what's the other book that I mentioned? Remind me. We had Sayyid Tijani, we had Muraja'at, and we had, what were the two first ones? Who remembers?
The first one you said was by either Sheikh or Sayyid Murtada Askari, something.
Yeah. Ahsant, Sheikh Ali. So the book by Sayyid Murtada Askari, Ma'alim al-Madrasatain, okay, which basically means it's translated into either the knowledge or the signs of the two schools, okay, or the monuments of the two schools. A ma'alam is considered a monument. So he took like monumental terms and concepts, and he basically, it's not a discussion between him and a Sunni like the Knights of Peshawar, or like Thumma Ihtadayt, where he's a Sunni and he's trying to find the truth. Or for example, Muraja'at between two high scholars, Sayyid Sharafuddin, or Sheikh Sharaf, yes, Sayyid Sharafuddin. Or, you know, like, yeah, Ma'a Sadiqeen is very similar to Thumma Ihtadayt in many ways.
Although I have a question. Are they in English translation or no?
These are all English.
All English?
Yeah. I only give you names that are translated into English, and they're available in Dearborn, you know, in the bookstores. They're available, and you can also order them online. They're available. You can order them on Khatoons, or you can also .com, or you can order them on alkhoi.com.
Okay.
They're very available. You can also find them on alislam.org. You can download them. I see Sister Tala provided us with a link for a couple of them, and Brother Anwar also for Peshawar Nights. Okay, so we already got 3 links up there from alislam.org. Ma'alim al-Madrasatain is a very good one if you just want to see the evidence from both schools without it being an actual discussion or a novel-based sort of idea. Okay. All right. So now that we have some references that will help you understand, you know, the quote unquote, not just this Shia Sunni divide, but the differences in understanding of different concepts between, you know, both schools of thought, it becomes important for us to understand why is it then that, you know, we focus, a lot of people, they say, oh, you know, you Shia, you focus so much on Amir al-Mu'mineen, right? We hear this a lot, okay? You know, the Sunnah get together. You heard me say this, the Sunnah can all pray under one mosque. Why can't we pray under one mosque, right? Even though we should be more likely to be able to be united, considering that we're all under the flag of al-Hujjah, salamullahi alayhi, right? In their case, you know, they're also waiting for Al-Hujjah, by the way. They believe in Imam al-Mahdi. They probably have more narrations about Imam al-Mahdi than we do, okay? But the reality is that for some reason they're able to congregate together, even though you have the Hanbali and Shafi'i and Maliki and yet, you know, they're still able to be under one roof. We have a lot to work on, let's just say that, okay? However, understanding the basis and the foundation of what a true Muslim is. This term, by the way, we've been hearing it a lot, I would say since 9/11 in our communities, the term true Muslim or true Islam, you know, has become more prevalent, okay? In even Western media, like when we Muslims go out and we address true Islam versus false Islam, we tend to refer to false Islam being what? What do we refer to as being false Islam usually?
Extremism.
Extremism,
Like,
you know,
the group.
like those who pray a lot all the time, right? No, right? Yeah, I'm just challenging terms, that's all, okay? So extremism as an extreme what? People who?
Strictly follow the teaching of religion.
Okay, so strictly follow the teachings of religion. You see, Sister Isra, when you say extreme, we say, here we have an understanding that a person who is extreme is a person who strictly follows religion. But in reality, the Western use of extremism, or what's the other term? Starts with an F. Fundamentalism. Yeah, fundamentalism. Yeah, fundamentalism, right? And fundamentalism coming from the word fundamental, which is, it's an interesting ism because, you know, someone who believes in the fundamentals, right? Because Marxism is someone who believes in the thought of Karl Marx, right? Communism is someone who believes in communist thought, right? Fundamentalism is someone who believes in the fundamentals, right? Extremism is someone who believes in extreme lifestyles, right? Like jumping off, for example, a bridge or throwing yourself outside of a plane, right? Right? Sister Zainab is confused. What I'm doing is I'm challenging the terminology, okay? That's what we're doing, okay? We have to really be clear. Sometimes terminology is dictated to us, right? Right, Haj Jamil?
Yeah, I mean, when I think of extremism, I think of like Daesh or ISIS.
There you go.
So yeah,
yeah.
So it's it's kind of fascinating how other people view it too, you know.
Yeah, the way that I think about it is that those people are so confused about Islam that they look at ISIS and they say that, oh, they are following the real Islam. Of course, they are wrong. That's not the case. But in my opinion, and I may be wrong, I really hope that I'm wrong, is that they come up with the term extremism as someone who's strictly following the teachings of Islam to falsely show maybe the public of America that, oh, look at Islam, those are the ones that are truly following it, it's so violent and so on, which is very wrong. And again, I really hope that the way that I'm thinking is wrong, but Sheikh Aous, if you can, please add more from your knowledge, that would be great.
No, I sent Azizi Ahmed. I think it's important to understand the terms, understand where they come from. Like, for example, like I told you, in the Sunni school of thought, they took the term companion and they made it to anybody who was in the time of the Prophet, whether they saw him or not. Oh, if they saw the Prophet, he's one of the close companions, okay, right? When we know that a companion is someone who's always
being
accompanying, right? Right? That's what it means, right? Someone who is, if I call Haj Jamil my companion, right? Does that imply that, you know, we're close, that we're tight? Or does that imply that, you know, he's seen me once or I've seen him once in our lifetime?
It implies that you guys are close.
Of course, right? That we're close. So that's what the Shia school of thought says. versus what the Sunnis call. Why would they do that? Why would they kind of take terminology that seems clear, right, to anyone? Because you're telling me, Sheikh, man, why are you asking me such obvious questions? Because first of all, always what we learn in epistemological arguments, also in philosophy and in logic, that the first thing we have to do is establish a baseline, a foundation that we all agree on. Most disagreements occur because of a difference in the use of terms, okay? So I might use one term in a specific manner, and you might use it in another manner. I might have a specific understanding and have a specific definition of it, while you might not. Let me give you a simple example. As we're growing up, we pick up a lot of vocabulary, right? Okay. How many of us have fallen into using a word out of place? Right? When we're first learning, it's very common, correct? And this is also very common when someone is trying to expand their vocabulary, okay? What they tend to do is they try to use the new words that they learned, right? When you have the word a day, right? And then it pops up the word of the day and you try to use it in a sentence and it actually challenges you, use this word in a sentence today, right? And you just botch it, like you kill it, right? Not in the good way. You kill the usage of the term. It's just bad. Or you're with someone and then you hear them use a word in a way that's completely off. Like it leaves you confused, right? So if you're nice enough, you'll find a way to tell them, I don't think, are you sure that word is right? Is the right word to use here, right? This simple example is exactly why we have differences of opinion, okay? Because you have a group that now mindfully takes a word and tries to redefine it, okay? That if I redefine the word in my time, then future generations will be able to do what? Will be able to take it as I want them to take it, not as the truth actually is. And let me give you a simple example. I mentioned this the other day. You find, for example, the LGBTQ, right? Before, in the Library of Congress, they were basically classified under mental disorders, right? They worked very hard on trying to get themselves categorized or classified in the Library of Congress under minorities and diverse populations, okay? Once that transition occurred, now nobody saw them as deviants or as, people with mental disorders. Now, look, if you say something bad about anyone who has that lifestyle, now you're the abnormal one, correct? Right? Now you're the one that's attacked. So you see how important redefining and reclassification actually is for someone who wants to cause people to deviate. It's as simple as doing something like that. Declassification or changing just one word in the meaning. So for example, companion, which was someone who accompanied the Prophet and was close to him, becomes someone who lived in the time of the Prophet. And then tabi'een means someone who lived after the time of the Prophet. Okay, وَالتَّابِعِينَ لَهُمْ بِإِحْسَانٍ, those who followed, in righteousness. So now, and the same thing is going to apply to Muslim, right? And so what happens is, under the umbrella of Islam comes what? Comes the hypocrite, and comes the mu'min, and comes the mu'min bil-ma'na al-a'am, and the mu'min bil-ma'na al-akhas, the general meaning and the specific meaning of mu'min, right? Comes the Muslim that is adherent and the Muslim that is non-adherent, the Muslim that drinks alcohol and the Muslim that doesn't drink alcohol, right? The Muslim that prays every now and then and the Muslim that doesn't pray every now and then, right? And the Muslim that just, could care less, right? His parents are Muslim, if he lived somewhere else, he'd change his faith anyway. It doesn't really matter to him, it doesn't affect his life, okay? So why is it then that Islam uses the term Muslim in general like this, and then uses mu'min in more specific ways, right? And why is it that if we are supposed to be one ummah, right, and we're all supposed to be Muslim, and this is the important question, Hajj Jamil, that I think you're gonna like, why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us all to be Muslim under one anwan, under one label, and yet He then comes and says to us, oh, no, Be mindful of something. ما تصدق حالك, right? Don't believe, the hype. Don't hype yourself up. You're not a Muslim, okay? You're a mu'min, okay? And you're not a mu'min, and you're just a Muslim. You get it? Okay. Not that the first one, of course, isn't a Muslim. He's a Muslim, obviously, because he did iqrar. Right? So why does Allah do this? Why does He tell us, listen, you're all one nation, you should all be unified. And then He makes this clear separation. Yeah, let's see who's going to answer this question.
I'm gonna take a shot since no one's talking, if you guys don't mind. Basically, I think the level of Islam and Iman and Taqwa falls under the category of religious levels. For example, the levels maratib in the deen, basically.
Mm-hmm.
The simple word of Islam, it means that, okay, I submitted myself to Allah. I said the Shahada and I submitted myself. Allah says in the Quran, don't say that you're a mu'min, say that we are a Muslim, and keep on worshipping God until you basically know that He actually exists. I'm very sorry, I forgot the verse. But long story short, let's say that you're Islam and keep on worshipping God until you get the proof.
Yeah, that one is أعبد ربك حتى يأتيك اليقين, right?
Yeah.
حتى يأتيك.
Yes.
So that's one verse.
Yeah. Shukran. Thank you very much, Sheikh Aous. So Islam is the very bare minimum. Then Iman is when you actually believe in Allah and you thrive in His worship to get closer to Him. And then Taqwa is, I think, is one of the highest levels. And it's where you're mindful of Allah in all of your action. So it's levels dividing not based on race or based on from where you are or what type of people you are, but it's mainly based on your effort as a human being, as a person, like how much effort I'm going to put to my religion. Based on that, then you get classified. Maybe.
Ahsan. So we established that a couple of days ago, what you said, except we're a little more specific. So we said you have your Islam, a person is Muslim first and foremost, right? When he says the Shahadatain. Then al-imanu amalun bil-arkan, as Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, means that you are adherent, you follow the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We said that a mu'min then becomes of two types. The mu'min bil-ma'na al-a'am, the general meaning, and then bil-ma'na al-akhas, the more specific meaning. Meaning those mu'mineen that follow the ahkam, but they don't necessarily believe in the wilayah of Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi, they would still be considered a mu'min, just not bil-ma'na al-akhas, not ithna ashari mu'min, following the wilayah of Ahl al-Bayt. And then the more specific one would be those following the wilayah of Ahl al-Bayt. We also mentioned that there's two hadiths in al-Kafi where Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq says al-imanu ala arba'i ashum, that iman ala ashri ashum. In another one, al-iman ala sab'ati ashum, that iman is at 10 levels, and in another narration that iman is at 7 levels. Okay, so he who is at a higher level, if he sees one at a lower level make a mistake, then he has to be kind to them and generous enough to teach them and bring them up to a higher level with them. Okay, what is the separation? Okay, is that each one of these levels is attained with a specific level of respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more respect you have for Allah, the greater your level is to Allah, right? The more respect you have for Allah, the more it is manifested through your actions. The greater your actions of amal al-salihat, adhering to your prayers, adhering to giving charity and so forth, the greater your level of ibadah will be, right? And the more adherent you will be, and that is your taqwa. The more respect you have, the greater your taqwa. So the levels then from iman, or let's say from Islam being the lowest level, all the way up to iman at the 10th level of iman. That is attained according to your level of respect to Allah, which means your level of taqwa. Ahsan. Okay? So the question isn't this. The question is, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who wants us to be one nation, okay, point out specifically, call out people and say, you're not a Muslim, you're a mu'min. Isn't that not going to create disunity amongst people? Is that not the problem that we have today? Even within, I remember I was in one chat online, and there was this one sister, I guess she wasn't a hijabi, and she made a comment, and this brother he knew that she wasn't a hijab. I mean, I can't remember if it was from her profile picture or what. And then he says to her, you know what, if you wore a hijab, maybe Sayyidah Fatima would listen to you, you know. Oh, no, that was a different situation. I'll tell you that one. He said, you know, if you wore hijab, then maybe I would take what you say seriously. You know, so he really like just, I mean, he was just cruel, right? And then in the conversation, it kept on getting more and more heated until he said to her, he said, what's the point of your Islam anyway? You know, if you don't follow, if you're not a hijabi, you might as well just leave the faith. It was the worst conversation I'd ever seen. And this isn't the first time I've witnessed something like this, unfortunately. I had one time, even someone, unfortunately, who was a speaker. This was in Dearborn, years back. And this was, I think, during the month of Ramadan, because I recall when he was saying it to us, he was telling us the story. This was before I ever went to study in Hausa, before I ever became a speaker. He said he'd just come back from a program, and we're all a bunch of shabab, you know, having iftar together. And he very proudly, he says, you know, after the end of the prayer, the lecture, you know, we did a dua and everything else like that. And there was one girl that wasn't a hijabi. And I singled her out and I said to her, you know, you think Sayyidah Fatima is going to accept your dua if you don't cover your head? All right? Just cruel, just absolutely cruel. And everybody went quiet at the table, I remember. You know, and I said to him, you know, doesn't Allah say, لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي? That there is no compulsion in religion. قد تبين الرشد من الغي means that it's become clear to us what righteousness and the right path is in comparison to deviation and oppression, right? So, you know, I said, do you really think you brought her closer to Fatima Zahra salamullahi alayha by saying something like this? That's terrible. You know, how do you know that last year she would have never come and this year she came? How do you know that this year right when you told her this, you know, she might have decided to wear her hijab, but you caused her not to wear her hijab? How do you know what's inside a person? Right. The question is, and I'm trying to play devil's advocate here, okay? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes this distinction and this separation, right? Does he want to separate us, right? What is it that Allah wants to do? What is his point here?
I think that so there's like two things. I think one of them is if we want to have unity, if we want to be like one big ummah, we have to have people to look up to. You know, the people on the lower levels have to have people to look up to, and so forth and so on. So if everybody was just Muslim, you wouldn't know who to look for and what kind of person to take as a role model.
Okay, Ahsant. That's a good answer. Who else? I have Sister Aya here, says, on the contrary, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to excel, to improve in order to become a mu'min. It's like the fact that there is a Harvard makes a student believe they can try better to get closer to that university. Okay, that's another good opinion. What else? Okay, so let me ask you this. When someone is called out in front of others, is that more likely to bring them closer? That's my whole point here. So why is it that Allah calls these people out then?
It's because their actions are driving people away from the religion. Just like you were saying, Sheikh, if there was a chance that she was getting close to the religion, but maybe she's not ready to wear the hijab, maybe she needs more encouragement, more time. By his actions of calling her out, now he just drove her away. And that's horrible.
Okay, so Allah is calling them out. Doesn't that drive them away?
But I also think it goes vice versa. Like, if Allah calls them out and says you're a mu'min, and then he's holding you to a higher standard so you can like display those actions so that people can follow you.
Okay.
I think it's out of the fear of people thinking that what those people were doing is actual Iman and actual Islam, like that's the right path.
Remember, we said that. Go ahead. Who's next?
I just wanted to say, I think it also has to do with he's defining mu'min. He's not saying that he's saying you do these things, you follow these actions, and then you can become a mu'min. So there isn't any way that people can just label someone else a mu'min. You can't give someone else that he's better than me, let's follow him, when when his actions don't represent what being a mu'min really is. So God is defining it so that he can say who is the mu'min and who isn't, and that we can't.
Okay, so that's a very good point right there. Anything else? Brother Nader, you want to share something? Brother Nader, your mic is on, so you better share something. Oh, now your mic is off. Okay. Someone else? Yalla, let's hear some opinions. We've got Ja'far, Sister Sarah, Brother Ahmed, Al-Musawi, Brother Shab, Sister Fatima, Brother Ali Bazzi, Sister Nagan.
What was the question?
Okay, so the question was, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala call these people out in the verse? Aren't we supposed to be all unified? If we call people out on their faith, does that not cause disunity? So what does Allah want to achieve here?
Isn't it just like Nahi al-Munkar? We're just calling out what's wrong in front of us, but we do it the right way, we do it a certain way. Because we're supposed to call people out, but there's a way that we have to do it. We don't do it. We do it in a way where we're trying to guide them.
Okay.
Like we have to be able to recognize what's fake and what's mishsah, what's not real, what's not truth.
Okay, very good. So that's similar to what Brother Hussein also said. You have to be able to recognize truth from falsehood. So could that be what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to recognize? He wants us to recognize, a false prophet sort of thing. To figure out who is truly a mu'min and who isn't means that you have to abide by the standards that are divine standards. Not someone coming and saying, oh, you know what, we did a great job. We did a great job, alhamdulillah. We did a great job. We controlled everything from the beginning, from the get-go. We have very, very little casualties in comparison to other countries, right? Rewriting history on the spot, right? No, we're great. There's nobody better than us, right? We're the best, right? We are the truth. Are you kidding me? This is the new truth, right? Right? So why does it then become important for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do such a thing? Right? It becomes important because Allah wants to say, listen, there are people who falsely are going to claim that they're mu'min so that you follow them. Because mu'min now is a status symbol, okay? People want it as a status symbol so that they can control others. But think about it, right? If you have someone who's a reciter in your mosque, how much do you revere the reciter in the mosque, the reciter of the Holy Qur'an? How much do you respect them?
Very much.
A lot, right? Probably if you were to compare the Sheikh in your mosque, okay, with the reciter and compare them to everybody else, the reciter would come like a very close second to the Sheikh, right?
Yes.
Even though all he does is just recite the Holy Qur'an. So he could have opinions that are way left field or way right field, whichever field you're at, okay? But why do we respect him so much?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam, Sister Jen.
I think it's because we assume that just because he knows how to recite the words, that he understands them and implements them in his actions.
So that in itself, ahsanti, Sister Jenna, that in itself is actually a fallacy that the Ahl Sunnah have grabbed onto. Because what the most important thing to them is Hafidh al-Quran. You often hear many people say this. They say, oh, the Shia, they don't memorize the Quran, but the Sunnah, look at them. They memorize the Quran like it's part of their, their very being, the Holy Quran. But the Shia, look, they don't. How many of us have heard this before? Right? Okay. And yet, the amount of you see much deviation, even though they memorize the Quran, they don't understand it. So what's the point of memorizing and reciting if you don't understand? Okay, so memorizing and reciting is extremely important, don't get me wrong, okay? However, focusing on the meanings is extremely important because Allah says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ أَمْ عَلَى قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Do they not take the time to understand the Holy Quran, or are there locks on their hearts? So if someone's a reciter, that's great. You know, that's something that we want to aspire to, right? But what we even want to aspire to is a level higher than that, to ensure that when we recite, we understand what we're reciting. Because Allah says there's no good in reciting without understanding, right? Otherwise, there's going to be locks on your hearts, right? So here then, let's say, for example, let's take a very practical example. Let's take a practical example of us being at work, okay? And you know, there are some at work who aren't really qualified necessarily. It's not their area of expertise. You are more of an expert in that specific area. Yet they always try to, you know, control the meeting. And when it comes to this issue, they try to speak over you and give their opinion, right? Have you ever had that happen to you? Anyone?
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, yes. Yeah.
Right? Okay. And you just wish you could put them in their place. But you know, if you do, right, you know, it might turn against you, or it might seem rude and impolite, right? Right?
Yep. It would be very disrespectful.
It could be very perceived as being very disrespectful, right? But what if this person can literally cause, let's say, by the decision that they make, they could cause just deaths, you know, meaning just complete carnage and damage and destruction by assuming the role of an expert when they're not. Oh, you know what? Hydroxychloroquine? Yeah, I mean, what is it gonna hurt, right? What's it gonna hurt? Let's do it. Forget about Dr. Fauci, right? Dr. Fauci, what was it? Hashtag fire Fauci, right?
Inject yourself with disinfectant, Sheikh. It takes away the virus.
Inject yourself with disinfectant, right? And yet we still see that this person is right, is still at these meetings, and he's still, you know, because why? Because he's POTUS, right? So we see this not just in meetings at work, not just at school, not just in our daily lives, right? Now imagine when it comes to akhirah, okay? Listen, you can mess with everything else, but don't mess with my akhirah, right? Don't mess with my hereafter, okay? You know, you want to make stuff up, you know, and other things, you know, fine. But my akhirah, no, that's unacceptable, right? That's where I draw the line. Allah is saying that. He's saying, listen, when in times when ignorance reigns, you know, the knowledgeable must show his knowledge, right? The scholar must show his scholarship. Why? For what purpose?
To drive the ignorance away.
Yeah, to protect people. That's why we see when, you know, for example, Trump wanted to open up, right, and Easter. What did Dr. Fauci say? He said, I don't think that would be the right thing to do. I advise against it. And then you see the headlines, Dr. Fauci contradicts POTUS, right? Okay. But it was his responsibility to do so. Otherwise, people would be hurt, right? People would get infected, maybe even die. Okay. So why is this any different than when it comes to al-akhirah? Because Allah says, وَالْآخِرَةُ خَيْرٌ وَأَبْقَى. He says, and the hereafter is better and everlasting. So shouldn't it be that when it comes to the hereafter, that we're more attentive to issues concerning truth and falsehood?
That's right. It's the only thing that truly matters.
And that's what Allah is saying. He's saying, listen, don't listen to, you know, the Trumps of Islam. Okay? Here, these guys are coming along. They're literally the Trumps of Islam. Okay? They're saying, you know, they're claiming that they're mu'mineen. You know, oh yeah, I'm a mu'min, right? That's what he's saying. Saying, I'm a mu'min, right? Allah's saying, You know, no, step aside. Okay, right? This podium is not yours. Okay, you need to be down there listening. So get off your podium and listen. All right? The reality is that a believer is not you. Okay? Allah says in the next verse really beautifully, in verse 15, He says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Allah here defines what a believer is. He says, you remember when we said, when you see innama, what does it mean? There, Sister Tala is nodding. Yalla, Sister Tala.
حصر.
Sheikh Ali beat you to it. Now you have to say it in English. He said it in Arabic.
It's confinement. So the inna means like an exception, and then the ma is a negation, and it creates confinement or emphasis, sorry, not exception.
Emphasis, accent, exactly. Emphasis plus negation, put them together, you have a tool of confinement, which in Arabic is adat hasr, okay, a tool of confinement. So whatever comes after it is the topic of whatever you're trying to confine, to define. When we say confinement, meaning define, okay? So here we find Allah says, the believers are no other than these. Surely the believers are no other than these. Who? الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا بِاللَّهِ, those who believe in Allah. وَرَسُولِهِ, and His Messenger. ثُمَّ لَمْ يَرْتَابُوا, meaning what? Meaning, and then they had no doubt whatsoever in them, in this belief system. وَجَاهَدُوا بِأَمْوَالِهِمْ, and they struggled in the way of Islam using their wealth. وَأَنفُسِهِمْ, and their health, okay, and their manners and their behaviors, everything about them, right? فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, in the way of Allah. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الصَّادِقُونَ, those are the ones who are true Muslims or believers. Do you see how clearly he defines it? Because if a person takes the verse before out of context, they'll say, well, why is Allah being so harsh to them? Right? Why is he making such a separation? What's the big deal? Allah says, no, there is a big deal. The big deal is that at the end of the road, as Brother Hussein, Brother Ja'far mentioned, you know, how are we going to know who to follow? Right? Otherwise, if you change the terms, what's going to happen is I'm going to end up following false leaders. And what happens to most of the ummah? Who did they follow? The leaders that Allah chose for them in the Holy Qur'an? No. And notice it's in the Holy Qur'an. And I want you to pay attention to something here. And I know Sheikh Ali has heard this from me before, you know, because he took Arabic grammar with me, and he knows my theory about it. That we find, for example, that there are foundational subjects that must be taught to all Muslims, and specifically those in the Arab world. Before, you were taught grammar, and you were taught something called balagha. Balagha is the eloquence of speech. Now remember, one of the miracles of the Quran is its eloquence, correct? That no one was able to come up with a Quran, not a Quran, not 10 chapters, not one chapter similar to it, right? Why? Because it was so eloquent. Even Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, who was known to be the highest level of poet at the time, every year they'd have their poetry slam. In Mecca, they would actually post on the curtains of the Kaaba the verses from his poetry. And they were called al-mu'allaqat because they were hung from the curtains of the Kaaba. So today we see, for example, we see verses of the Holy Qur'an. In those days, the days of Jahiliyyah, they used to have Arab poetry. The winner of the poetry slam would actually have their name hung. And that's why they were called the hung verses, al-mu'allaqat. How many people knew this?
I did not.
Okay, so now you know, right? Now, Al-Walid ibn al-Mughira, he's commanded by Abu Jahl and Abu Sufyan to go listen to Prophet Muhammad at the advent of the revelation so that he can kind of get some dirt, you know, and come back so that they can use it against him. So he goes, he listens to the words, he returns. They say, yeah, well, tell us, what did you hear? And he says to them, well, Wallahi ma huwa bi kalami bashar. He says, I swear these are not the words of a human. He says, its heights are higher than the highest peaks, and its depths are deeper than the deepest of oceans. I swear these are not the words of a human being. Okay, so you notice here then, eloquence then really for us as Arabs and as Muslimin should be very important, because it is the main miracle of the Holy Qur'an. And yet how many of us have even heard that we should learn eloquence of speech? We've learned maybe we need to learn Arabic grammar, right? But how many of us have heard that we should learn eloquence? Let's poll everyone. How many have heard? Anybody?
Well, I shouldn't count because I studied Arabic in Kuwait, but I heard about balagha.
Okay, good. So Ahmed studied in Kuwait like I did when I was younger. So anybody else?
I mean, eloquence of speech is very powerful. It's very powerful.
True.
You can be like the smartest person in the world, and you can have a great invention, but if you don't know how to communicate with people and tell them about it, that's it. You know, but if you're like really not very smart, but you know how to speak well, definitely get farther than the guy that's really smart.
Very well said, Brother Jimmy.
Sheikh Ali, I'm sure he's heard of balagha from me and from his teachers.
Persuasion. Wouldn't that be another persuasion?
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, it's
knowledge of how you say it and everything, knowing how to persuade the person.
Yeah, but balagha really is defined as balaghatul kalam and balaghatul mutakallim, meaning the eloquence in the actual words themselves that you use, your choice of words, and the balagha of the person who actually speaks. And we say balaghatul kalam or balaghatul mutakallim hiya qudratuhu ala al-kalam al-baligh, meaning that it's his ability to actually speak eloquently. But he can only speak eloquently if he adheres to the laws and the canons or the rules of eloquence in speech, which means that he has to know Arabic grammar and he doesn't make any mistakes in it. He has to know Arabic morphology, sarf, and he doesn't make any mistakes in it. He doesn't use words in forms that are confusing, right? He knows the proper Arabic taste, you know, in choice of words and style, right? And finally, that the words that he uses don't cause confusion. Okay, so look at all these things that the person has to know in order for him to have eloquence of speech. So many of the Arabs, they grew up listening to poetry, and that's why the Quran, when it came down, it didn't come down, you know, the miracle wasn't medicine like in the time of Prophet Isa. It wasn't magic like in the time of Prophet Musa, right? The biggest thing of the time was poetry. And so in order to beat the Arabs, you had to have a poetry slam. You know, you had to have, you know, basically a battle of words. And whoever came on top, and it was actually the words, right, of the Holy Qur'an that were the miracle. Okay, why? Because of the supreme eloquence of such words. Today, scholars of eloquence of speech, they refer to two other than the medieval pre-Islamic verses of poetry. They refer mainly to the Holy Qur'an and to the words of Ali ibn Abi Talib, salamullahi alayhi, Amir al-Mu'mineen, sallu ala Muhammad wa
Salli ala Muhammad wa ali.
They say if you want to be eloquent in speech, then you should memorize the whole, memorize Nahj al-Balagha or recite Nahj al-Balagha every day. Okay, but to know the actual rules themselves, okay, requires a lot of work. Today, nobody teaches Balagha. Even Ahmed will tell you in schools in Kuwait, nobody teaches Balagha. Okay, any Arabic country you go to, nobody teaches Balagha. Okay, the same can be said to the science of rhetoric. Okay. Rhetoric used to be taught before in English schools and in the West. I think it was more in the 40s and the 30s. You know, in the 1800s, rhetoric was something that was taught. Okay, but after a while, the school system stopped teaching rhetoric. Why? Because rhetoric has within it logical arguments, you know, how to actually steer people your way. It has a lot with eloquence as well, and how to express yourself and how to even control a conversation. Okay, today that's not being taught. Those who want to know about rhetoric, you know, you can go on YouTube and you can watch some videos that'll tell you more about it. Okay, other than obviously the definition in the dictionary. So here then, if I, you know, remove balagha from the Arabs and I make them hate grammar, then they're not going to understand the Holy Qur'an, because the Qur'an, its miracle was balagha, right? And today, by the grammarians, it's used as a reference point to understand the language of the Arabs of the time, right? Most of us, we're struggling to understand the English, right? Or to pronounce properly. Imagine how much information we're missing by not knowing the grammar. And what's interesting is this, and the balagha. What's interesting is this, is the most eloquent in speech of all time, really, was who? Ali ibn Abi Talib, salamullah alayhi. This is known by all Arabs, okay? That's number one. Number two, who was it that placed the laws of qawa'id, of nahu, of grammar, Arabic grammar? The first to do so was Ali ibn Abi Talib. When Abu Aswad al-Du'ali, the companion, came from the Prophet's mosque, he heard people reciting the Holy Qur'an and making errors. He said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, inni sami'tu an-nasa yulhinuna fi qira'at al-Qur'an. I heard people make errors as they recite the Holy Qur'an. So he said to him, Uktub ya Aba Aswad, write, O Abu Aswad, write down what I'm going to tell you. Al-kalimatu ismun wa fi'lun wa harf. A word is of three types. It's a noun and a verb and a particle. And then he goes on and he gives them all the details of grammar. So most of us, we take a little bit of grammar in Saturday school or Sunday school, and we're like, man, it's so hard, I hate it, you know, right? In the Arab world, they take it, you know, at least 2-3 times a week, you know, and they hate it, even though they're Arabs. Right, Ahmed?
Oh yes, the hardest class, one of the hardest classes that I've ever taken in school is Arabic. Man, the Arab is hectic.
Even though in reality, if you come to the Hawza, okay, you'll find a book, very small book called Ijrumiyya. I remember coming out of the school system, like Brother Ahmed said, coming out of Kuwait, for example, I did not enjoy Nahu. I wanted to be good at it, but I didn't enjoy it, you know. So it wasn't until later on in life when I actually moved to the West and I discovered this book as I was taking a Hawza class with a Sheikh, that I discovered this book. This book just simplifies it. It turns it into charts for you. It's very, very simple. It's called Al-Ijrumiyya. Sheikh Ali took it. Sheikh Ali took it. He knows, he can tell, he can testify to that, right, Sheikh Ali? Right, Ahsanti, Sister Fatma. It doesn't matter if they recite, it doesn't matter if they preach. Most important thing is their iman and their taqwa, right? ISIS speaks the Quran, but obviously they're very far away from it, she says. That's very right. Right. So
عفوا شيخنا, I heard you, but definitely, yeah, I remember Ijrumiyya with you.
Right.
I also took Nahu al-Wadih, which was also beneficial in Hawza.
Exactly. And these are in the Hawza. You find the Hawza, it actually simplifies grammar for you greatly. Okay. The same thing applies to Balagha in the Hawza. You have different levels, you know, and you learn them as you go along. Why are these important? Because look, if I don't have those, then I'm never really going to understand the Quran as I'm supposed to. And if I don't really understand the Quran as I'm supposed to, what's going to happen? Right? Someone is going to come and tell me what it means. Oh, you see how this is used? You see how that is used, right? When I tell you inna and ma, right? Inna means a tool of emphasis and ma is a tool of negation. How do you know that that's true? Right? You base it on the fact that you know I studied in Hawza, right? And I'm giving you this information and you trust it, right? When I tell you, you put them together, it becomes a tool of definition or confinement. You wouldn't have known that unless you had a teacher to tell you this, right? So imagine going through life not knowing okay? And then anybody can come and tell you something. If you haven't verified who they are, their level of scholarship, how are you going to know really that what they're giving you is true or false? And that is the case for most people, you know, who are Muslim. Most people don't know. They depend on those who they trust, right? Those who they go to. So like these people who are, let's say, ISIS or those who maybe don't like Ahl al-Bayt for some reason or another, the Nawasib, the reason why is because they either grew up in this environment and they were taught and brainwashed from an early age, or that those who taught them were false prophets, were just bad teachers, right? And this is why it's important for then the knowledgeable to show their scholarship, and Allah first and foremost to tell us that, listen, don't look at someone just because, you know, they have nice cars and they have, you know, golden towers and they have, I don't know, toilet seats that are made out of gold, okay, right? No, none of that matters, okay? Even if they're a Muslim, that doesn't mean that they're mu'min, okay? You have to look at their iman. And their iman is exactly this. If you see them hesitate when it comes to something that has to do with their faith, okay, then what's going to happen is, you know, their level of iman is not strong. But the problem is, even that you can't see with your bare naked eye, right? This is something that they only know. So how are you going to know? By their actions, right? By how steadfast they are through calamities, right? Whether you can depend on them during calamities or not. There's a hadith by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says, if you want to know the truth of a person, you know, see how they act in times of calamities, right? And we see that in front of us every day. Every day there's the task force comes along, right? You know, and you see Fauci steadfast, you know, the team of scientists steadfast in their knowledge, and you see the others, right? Wishy-washy, shaky-wakey, right? Okay, so in that case then, the next question is it up to me to determine and to point out that this person is a false prophet, meaning a false leader, you know? And is it my responsibility to go out to every person who is a Muslim, not a mu'min, and say to them, listen, you are a Muslim, you're not a mu'min, iman never even entered your heart, so don't even talk.
We cannot do that because our eyes cannot look into their heart and see what is their taqwa. Maybe.
Ahsan. Yeah, that's a good answer. But I want a little controversy here. So let's see. Let's hear some other opinion. Haj Ali, what do you say? Brother Ali Jum'ah, what do you think?
What was the question, Sheikh?
So the question is, you know, since we know the difference that Allah says in verse 15 of Al-Mu'minun, you know, don't say you know, you guys that have come to the Prophet claiming that you're believers, you know, don't say that you're believers. Say that you're Muslims. Iman never even entered your hearts. Okay, and this is the definition of a believer. Allah gives it in verse number 15. Okay, so does that mean that we should go around telling people, listen, you guys are not believers. You guys are just Muslims. You know, so stand down. You know your place. Don't talk. Is that what we should do? Right?
I would say, just off of general reflection, based off of what you gave, maybe to say that we are Muslims, we are people who submit in general to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes if you give yourself the title of mu'min or believer, sometimes that could get to your head, or that could cause arrogance in your heart to label yourself as a believer wherever you're walking, and you might have a lot of shortcomings. So sometimes if you do label yourself as this title and you aren't even a Muslim, which is a definition of submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala properly, you could be hurting Islam itself. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't call other people, like the second part of it, that you don't call them believers at all. But I just feel, generally speaking, what you said, it's just a form of humbling yourself and hoping that we can be those who submit to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ultimately leading us to be believers.
Okay, very good. Anybody have another opinion? Okay, so let me help you out. Okay, I think you guys had a little too much food for iftar, or you're getting sleepy. Okay, so let me shake things up for you here a little. Right? How many of us in our community have heard and said, don't go, and we said this the other day, don't walk with that person, don't go to that mosque, you know, these guys, they don't believe in what we believe in.
Yeah, definitely. It's I think that's also causing division probably when it's talking about believers and Muslims. So sometimes saying that they believe in different than you, it's like a superiority type of thing, and you start causing division in Islam.
So here then, like Brother Ali said, it creates division. When it happens where between mu'mineen, what you're really saying as a mu'min, that you should not tell another mu'min, you know, or judge another mu'min, okay? But when it comes to a person who is, we know he's a Muslim, right? Meaning that we know he's non-adherent, that we should make that distinction. Because at the end of the road, I have to know who is just and who isn't just. Remember the verse that we covered, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu in ja'akum fasiqun binaba'in fatabayyanu. Okay? O you who believe, if a corrupt person comes to you with news, then investigate, verify the information. أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين. Otherwise, you're going to cause people to fall into acts of ignorance, and then you'll be regretful for what you did. Right? So then it becomes a responsibility. You know why? Because a fasiq is someone who may have been mu'min or is a non-adherent Muslim, right? Fell out of iman, right? Or just is non-adherent and is known, for example, or could be known for not telling the truth, right? So based on that, then I have to make that distinction between a mu'min and a fasiq. I do need to make that distinction. Why? Because certain information is going to be based on it. Right? The salvation of people, their prayer, their relationship with Allah, right? Certain things that they do when they fast, when they break their fast. These, in this instance, it becomes important to make that distinction. In instances of leadership, okay, when we need to know who the true leader is and who a false leader is. Like I heard, for example, someone on the minbar, this is on YouTube. He said, you know, I respect all of the maraja, okay, but I say, if all he quoted this saying by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said, Imam Ali, Prophet Muhammad said, if everybody walks down a valley and Ali ibn Abi Talib walks down a valley, then follow Ali ibn Abi Talib. Okay. Then he says, I respect all of the maraja, but if all of the maraja walk down one valley and marja' fulan walks down one valley, then I say follow that marja'. Okay. What do you think about that? How has he used an argument to separate between, you know, Ali ibn Abi Talib and the hypocrite, to taking the maraja', right, and saying, oh, all the maraja' walk in one, as though they're the hypocrites and you only follow this one, but I believe in all the maraja'.
That's very ignorant and sad. Because if the maraja' themselves did not say that about each other, who is he to come out and say that?
Well, I would say I would add on to that. Imam Ali wouldn't go in a different direction than the Nabi. He'll always be with the Nabi.
No, not with the Nabi. Like, meaning after Prophet Muhammad dies, if Imam Ali walks in one direction and the others all walk in another.
Oh, I thought the Nabi was part of that. Oh, yeah. Okay. No, I follow Imam Ali, of course.
Yeah. But I'm saying, look at how he used this example.
Yeah.
And applied it. Sure. Prophet Muhammad was separating between Iman and Islam, right? He was separating between the hypocrites and the true believers. This person who's a Shia on YouTube, he says, listen, if all of the maraja', I love all the maraja', I respect them, but if all the maraja' walk in one direction and this one marja' walks in this direction, then I say walk behind him. As though he's the prophet and we should listen to him, number one, right? And as though he's really making a correlation that is true. And it's just based on falsehood, because either he's saying all the other maraja' are hypocrites and this one isn't, you know, or, you know, I'm going to hold him to the highest of excuses and say, he didn't know what he was saying and he just made a false statement. Okay? Because a statement like that is damaging. A statement like that is damaging. Do you agree or no?
That's true. That's true.
Right? So if you're on a platform on YouTube and people are listening to you, say something like this, how can we ever be together? If every mu'ammam gets up on a minbar and says something like this, how will we ever be together? I remember a few years back, Sayyid Munir al-Khabbaz, who's a mujtahid, well-known mujtahid, student of Ayatollah Khou'i, student of Sayyid al-Sistani, right? Student of Mirza Jawad al-Tabrizi, okay? High scholar in his own right. He's asked about the issue of maraja. He says, why are you guys even talking about something like this? Who you follow is your choice. We are all under the umbrella of Imam al-Hujjah, salamullahi alayhi, and we have to unify under that umbrella, right? Having different maraja gives us the ability to choose who we want to follow, okay? It doesn't separate us or segregate us at all. You notice? It should never do that. If somebody comes to you and tells you, for example, Sheikh Aous is not a mu'min, Sheikh Aous is not a mu'min, he's a Muslim. Say, well, how do you know that? Is he a Sunni? So that you say that and that would be clear? Because if you're talking about another mu'min, then this is a problem. Okay?
Afwan, Sheikhna, I have a question.
Yes, Brother Ja'far.
I know some people who personally, they don't even agree with the concept of maraja. Like the way that they do it is they do ihtiyat. But my question is, can you explain to me exactly like under what circumstances ihtiyat would be allowed? Because some people say with ihtiyat you have to learn about every single thing that basically each marja like what they say about every single ruling. Like I know people, the way that they do it, they don't follow maraja. So, but what they do is they basically I don't want to say pick and choose, but they have somewhat like a rough idea of what each one is about, and they just go about picking from each one, like to do ihtiyat for each one. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So to be able to answer that question, we have to understand the concept of ihtiyat as it pertains to emulation, to following a marja. Okay, so as it pertains to emulation or following a marja, you're one of three. You're either a marja yourself or a mujtahid. So you can follow yourself if you're a marja, or you're a mujtahid in, let's say, the book of salah. You can follow yourself in the book of salah, but you have to follow a marja or follow ihtiyat, do ihtiyat. Okay, or you're a follower, which is most of us, or you're a muhtat. What does muhtat mean? Muhtat means that you have reached a level of scholarship that you know most of the opinions of the maraja really well, and that allows you to take the hardest and the easiest and do them. So the way that ihtiyat is being taken today is that it's that whole pick and choose. And there are some people, maybe even some speakers. I went to one retreat and somebody told me, this speaker, he said this, and I remember talking to the speaker on the side and correcting his information. And we were, and he was a non-mu'ammam. He wasn't wearing a amama. He's just a regular run-of-the-mill, speaker. So even though a lot of people listen to him, and more than one person told me this was his opinion. That's why I approached him to make sure. So it's important for us to understand that the reason why we have maraja is because we need expertise in religion, right? Just like we would go to a doctor, right? We can go to a regular doctor, but once we have a problem, we go to a higher level doctor. At the end of the road, medicine, all of the medicine that we have is based on these higher level doctors setting the rules for what is right and what is wrong, right? Like notice, for example, in this crisis, when we want to know really what is the real information, we go to the highest level of doctor, who is Dr. Fauci, right? Right? So the reason why we go to him and not to other lower doctors, even by the way, when we see so many YouTube videos by other doctors, even Dr. Oz and Dr. Phil, and even though he's a psychologist, he's not even a psychiatrist, right? And other doctors, they're making these videos, you're like, I don't want to see this anymore, because I don't know who's right. I'm just going to listen to Dr. Fauci. How many people are at this point?
I'm at that point.
I'm at that point.
Same here.
Right. Is it safe to say that most of us are at that point? Hajj Mike is like, yeah, I'm almost there. Right? I only listen to my son-in-law or my cousin because he's a doctor, you know? You know, I'll tell you something. My father, he's a surgeon. Okay, he's a world-renowned surgeon in his own right. He does liver transplantation, small bowel transplantation. He's a kidney transplantation. He's a vascular surgeon, and he's very well published in his own right. He's considered the marja in his fields. In his fields, he's considered the marja. So I asked my father, I said, you know, why don't you make like a short video clip or something to advise people? He laughed at me. He said, Baba, you know, do you really think that I would attempt to even make a mockery of myself and my own scholarship by speaking about a topic that is not my specialization? He said, I would have to be an epidemiologist or a virologist, okay, in order to speak about this topic.
Wow, to that point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what you find, so that we understand, and I'm just going to mention this because I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, because I don't want to get into the whole discussion about, you know, maraji', who to follow, who not to follow. This is for another day, another time. You know, I don't think, you know, and it might even separate us. Some will say, oh, the Sheikh is biased or the Sheikh is this. I don't want to get into that because I don't want to fall into those traps, right? But what I do want to say is, at the end of the road, you have to choose a marja'. Why? Because a marja' is an expert, okay? Just like we would need to go to Dr. Fauci, right? At the end of the road, even the lower level maraja', they're learning. Like for me, my goal is to become a mujtahid. Maybe one day I can achieve that goal, okay? But today, I'm not a mujtahid, right? In a few years, maybe, if Allah gives me the life, the tawfiq, let's say, to be able to become a mujtahid, you know, or to learn how to derive laws. At that point, if you come to me and say to me, I'll follow you, I say, I wouldn't follow me, you know, go follow, you know, the top marja' that I learned from, right? Follow, you know, this marja', he's the top in the hawza. This is the person you need to follow. That's why all of us, for example, in the hawza of Najaf, we either are studying under Sayyid Muhammad Ridha Sistani or Sayyid Muhammad Sa'id al-Hakim or Sheikh Ishaq al-Fayyad, or we're studying under the students of Ayatollah Sistani, right? And Ayatollah Khouyi. That's who all of them are, right? So they're the top ones in Najaf. Those are the ones we study under. If you ask us for our opinion, we'll give you their opinions. We won't give you our opinion. Okay? Why? Because when you reach a certain level of scholarship, you realize what you have and what you don't have. Okay? But when you hear someone, he comes to you and he says to you, oh, you know what? I'm going to choose whatever one I think works for me. Okay? Well, it's exactly like saying, you know what? And I had this situation. It's interesting you brought this up because I had this really funny situation. Okay, it was sad too, and it was a story. Maybe Hajj Alex has heard this from me before, so bear with me, Hajj Alex. Hajj came to me one day. I almost mentioned his name. It would have been riba. Hajj came to me one day and he said to me, Sheikhna, you know, I have a problem. I said, what's the problem? He said, my mom. I said, how, your mom? What's the problem with your mom? He said, well, you see, the problem, Sheikhna, is that she won't listen to anyone. We keep telling her, stop self-medicating, okay? So she'll take a medication from her sister, she'll take a medication from her brother, she'll take a medication from her cousin, you know, the doctor, and she's an epileptic. So the doctors gave her a specific medication. They said to her, don't veer off this specific medical regimen. So she says, no. You know, I want to follow any other marja' I want. So Fulan comes and she picks and chooses. I'm going to take this drug. I'm going to take that medication. I'm going to take the other medication. Next thing you know, her epilepsy is crazy. You know, she's all over the place, right? And he doesn't know what to do, him and his brothers. So he said, could you please come and talk to her with your dad? Could you just tell your dad to come? So I said, okay. So we got in the car. We went and talked to her. So my father sat with her and he basically, she showed him all of the medications and he said, where did you get this from? She said, my brother. I said, where did you get this from? From my sister. Where did you get this from? From so-and-so. At the end of the road, you know, a person can choose for themselves whether they self-medicate or not. okay? But is it the right thing for them to do in reality? In the world of truth, it is not, right? In her world, it was right, right? But that's only a sign of what? Of a lack of information. And I don't want to say ignorance. Being misinformed, let's say, okay? Exactly, and we're all accused of it, by the way. And you know, in one of these discussions and in one of the lectures on misinformation, I mentioned, you know, how many of us receive messages. Haj Jamil told us about, you know, his experience, right? Our experiences with receiving WhatsApp messages and people who just keep shooting out social media messages without verifying them and checking them, right? So we have to be very careful and very mindful, and to be very gentle with someone like that, you know. Try to help them by giving them the necessary information. And if these examples were beneficial, you know, that I just gave, then, you know, use the examples by all means, okay? Because they might kind of bring the idea closer. It becomes less theoretical and more practical. I don't know if Haj Ali or Brother Nadir or someone else would like to add something. Haj Jamil or Haj Mike, Brother Anwar, please go ahead.
Does that mean that it's is it permissible though for them to do that if they practice, if they do it in that way?
Look, it's a crapshoot, okay? It's a hit and miss. So if they end up actually doing the stuff according to what the highest maraja say, then it'll be accepted. But if they don't and they miss, you know, then it won't be accepted. So it's literally like gambling with your deen.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Unless, again, you're a high scholar that is just shy of ijtihad, or you're a mujtahid and you just want to be precautious and you know all the opinions and you're trying to do the hardest. And like I said, it's not you pick and choose. You literally have to do the hardest and you have to do the easiest. And some of them, they even try to combine all of them and do as many as they can just to make sure they hit all their bases.
Sheikh, I had a quick question that I just want to see your opinion on, if that's
Sure.
You said something before about you said it was a video that someone said of
I saw it. It was on YouTube. I saw it myself.
that scholar that said it.
I didn't say he was a scholar. I said someone who was on YouTube.
Oh, okay. Could it have been that in the context of what was being said, that if he said Marja A goes in a valley and then all the other Maraja go in a different valley, that he said follow Marja A in this valley, could it have been that he wasn't taking the context between faith and disbelief, for example, the same framework of the Prophet's hadith saying between Ali ibn Abi Talib and all the people in the world? Could he have been?
But it's not in the same framework, Ali. Because the Prophet ﷺ was specifically referring to not following hypocrites and following Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi. That was the wrong usage, period. There's no way, you know, that you can say that this hadith can correlate to this. It's very, very hard to do something like that, you know. So the only thing that I can give this person an excuse, and I have to give him 70 excuses, and I pray that this video is removed, you know, because I really believe it creates division, you know. I think that, you know, maybe he has some sort of, we call it shubha, a confusion somewhere, or he meant to say something but he misspoke, you know. I highly advise, if you know whoever put this video up, you know, if you know, or you know anybody who does, you know, encourage them to remove it, because I think it doesn't look good for that person, and it certainly doesn't look good for the amount of people who will actually believe in it, you know, because of the person who may have been speaking, right? It creates a false deduction, and someone who, let's say, was a scholar shouldn't be making false deductions. We can all fall into errors, you know, but false deductions in such a situation when it comes to marja'iyya and deen, especially in a public forum, you know, like YouTube, can really cause a great deal of division.
That's the thing. I don't know if it was like a person in the community or like a scholar specific that said it, but the way I thought of it too, if it had to do with something with Maraja, I don't know if there was even a discussion that I heard probably in the past of something like that occurring. I don't know if they were saying it might have been in the context, like a context of leadership, not that they would, like, you know, indirectly call other Maraja like.
Ali, paint it in whatever brush you want, okay? I heard it in Toronto. The same speaker goes to Toronto. In Canada, I heard it in several places. They literally named the person and quoted, and it created serious division within the community because of it. You know, we can paint it as we want. We have to be very responsible. That's what I'm saying. Even if it's someone who's on YouTube who says this, you and me, you know, we can't let it affect us because we're all under the umbrella of an Imam al-Hujjah. Okay, so to say that the Hujjah, salamullahi alayhi, approves of all of the maraja existing at the same time, and he says, follow ruwat hadithina, right? Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq says, alayka bi Zurayra, thumma alayka bi akhihi Himran. Imam al-Ridha says that you can go to Adam ibn Zakaria and go to Yunus ibn Abd al-Rahman, right? And they all existed in the same time, right? The Imams say, go to these most knowledgeable maraja. You know, who am I to say, oh, choose this one, walk down his valley, okay, and leave the others? But that will create division, especially in this day and age, right? I pray, I told you, I give him 70 mahmals, but the problem is the end result, what I'm seeing, is that people are getting divided because of this. You know, I had a guy, unfortunately, literally almost got into a physical fight in Toronto last year, you know, because of something that he had heard from this person, and he really got into a fight with the other community members. It was really ugly, you know, and he kept on referring to what this person had said, unfortunately, because he respected him so much, you know, and you fear for someone who's respectable, la samahallah, to be misunderstood. You don't want that for yourself, so you don't want that for others too, right? Anyway, our point is not here. Our point is to be able to differentiate between, you know, how we define believers, that it's not me and you who define who a believer is, right? It's Allah who defines who a believer is. But Allah clearly tells me that when it comes to Islam, like I know, for example, someone who doesn't follow the camp of Ali ibn Abi Talib, salamullahi alayhi, right? I know that, but he follows, you know, Qur'an, he prays, he follows the Sunnah in that he fasts and he gives his zakat, his charity, then to me, that person is someone that has potential. But someone who's far gone, whether you call him a fundamentalist or an extremist or ISIS or whatever the case may be, that person, you know, is literally far gone. He's a nasibi, he's far gone, right? But even that person has a chance for tawbah. He still has a chance for tawbah, just like Hur had the chance for tawbah, right? But to be able to understand that Allah separates in the level of taqwa, and I have to be able to still recognize what's the truth from what is the falsehood, okay? And Allah says specifically, look for a fasiq who comes to you, a fasiq, not a mu'min. If I come to you and I tell you, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this, and Sheikh Ali Abu Khadr tells you, Prophet Muhammad came and said another hadith. Does that mean that Prophet Muhammad didn't say the hadith that I told you? Or that Sheikh Ali is lying and Prophet Muhammad didn't say the hadith that he said? No, right? It means that, you know that we're both trustworthy and we're both going to give you a hadith that's going to be trusted and true, right? But if somebody comes who's fasiq and wants, like for example, let me give you an example, okay? And when we came back from Hajj in 2001, I remember, first time I went to Hajj, I came back from Hajj and someone comes to me and says, you know, Hajj, you have 40 days to do as many sins as you want after Hajj. He said, and you're absolved. Imagine, and what? Yeah. I said,
سند معتبر شيخ.
ها؟
سند معتبر الهيئة.
سند تعبان. Right? I said, where did you hear this from? He said, oh, you know, it's a well-known narration from Prophet Muhammad. I said, oh, really? What's the source? And the problem is, he had affected so many people in the family. You know, there are people from my relatives who really believed him. Yeah, they really believed him. You know, what are you gonna say? Right? What are you gonna say?
There's always a chance to go to Hajj again, erase your sins again.
Right? What are you gonna say? Right? All you're gonna say is, okay, well, you know what? Let me check with someone who knows. Let me check with a scholar, right? And I'll get back to you, right? If you believe someone who makes such an outlandish statement, you're going to Hajj to literally erase all of your bad deeds. and this person tells you you have 40 days to, I think he thought that just like, you know, when you exercise, they say the first hour and a half after you exercise is the best time to really gorge, you know, because then your muscles will absorb the nutrients a lot faster. I think maybe he mixed the two riwayat. Okay. All right.
Sheikhna,
So, yes.
there's also, this reminds me of the narration about Sharab al-Khamr, the one who drinks alcohol. It says his prayer is not accepted for 40 days.
Yes.
And it's very common, even among the Lebanese community. They'll tell someone, "Khalas, don't pray. Yani, your prayer is
don't
not
pray.
accepted." Don't even bother yourself.
Yeah. So they're telling him to make a new habit, you know, because it takes 40 days to establish a habit. So for 40 days, since you're cutting off the alcohol, right? And because if for 40 days, he's supposed to literally not drink at all so that he creates a new habit. And after the 40 days, he continues, right? But he should also be praying, even though his prayers aren't accepted, right? According to the narration, so that he knows the seriousness of what he's done. He should still be in a state of fear and trying to seek closeness to Allah. And, you know, literally be on that prayer rug and try to do as many good deeds as he can off the prayer rug, right? So Ahsan, that's a really good example. So let's see. There's okay. So there's a narration here that's mentioned in the tafsir of al-Bahrani and al-Burhan by Muhammad bin Yaqub, who's the Sheikh al-Kulayni, al-Allama al-Kulayni, the author of the book of al-Kafi. He says that by way of Aban, by way of Abu Basir, by way of al-Imam al-Baqir, salamullah alayhi, who said, he said, I heard him here that قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. He says, فمن زعم أنهم آمنوا فقد كذب. He says, if someone comes to you and says to you, you know, I'm a believer, you know, then he has lied. ومن زعم أنهم لم يسلموا فقد كذب. And the person who says that they are not Muslims and they are Muslims, you know, then they have lied. Okay, so this is an interesting narration, but I think it, you know, it might be taken out of context, because I think that somebody asked him something and he said, you know, if somebody comes to me, makes such a claim and he's of these characteristics. So let's see another narration here. A narration also by Al-Allama al-Kulayni. He says, by way of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, عن قول الله عز وجل, that, you know, the meaning of قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا ولما يدخل الإيمان في قلوبكم. This is verse number 14. He says, ألا ترى أن الإيمان غير الإسلام. Don't you see that belief is different than Islam? That someone can be Muslim but not necessarily be a mu'min, a believer. And then in another narration also by within Al-Kafi, by Al-Mufaddal, by way of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, that he said, Al-Islamu yuhqanu bihi ad-dima aw ad-dam. Islam is to stop bloodshed. So you notice in Fath Mecca, the opening of Mecca, what happened was when the disbelievers said that they are Muslim, right, that they testified, then that stopped bloodshed. Okay, so this is what the, so admitting that or testifying that you're a Muslim, that you believe in Allah and His Messenger, that creates unity right away and that it stops bloodshed, he says. Okay, وَتُؤَدِّي بِهِ الْأَمَانَةِ, right? And if you're entrusted with something, you are to uphold that trust. وَتُسْتَحَلُّ بِهِ الْفُرُوجِ, and it allows for marriage between people. وَالثَّوَابُ عَلَى الْإِيمَانِ. He says, as for the true reward, you get the reward from your state of Iman. In another narration, also in Al-Kafi, by Muhammad bin Muslim, by Imam al-Baqir and Imam al-Sadiq, that they said, Al-Imanu iqrarun wa amalun. That Iman is to testify and to actually follow the laws of Allah. Wal-Islamu iqrarun bila amalun. Okay, that Islam is just to testify, not to necessarily follow the religion. That it's, as Brother Ahmad said, it's just the base. Okay, the lowest level that you can be at as a Muslim, right? So a few other narrations that are like this. Let's see what our Sunni brothers and sisters say about this issue. We have Mujahid. We said we'd always start with Mujahid, see what he says. He says, let's see. He says, عن ابن أبي نجيح عن مجاهد في قوله قالت الأعراب آمنا. قال نزلت هذه الأعراب نزلت هذه الآية في الأعراب Asad ibn Khuzaymah. He specifically said that this was revealed about Asad ibn Khuzaymah. Okay. Ali ibn Ibrahim al-Qummi, who's from 4th Hijri. Okay. He brings us a narration that says قوله إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا أي لم يشكوا وجاهدوا بأموالهم وأنفسهم في سبيل الله قد نزلت في أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام in describing أمير المؤمنين. So this definition of Iman is defined by Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullahi alayhi. As for verse number 14, so that's verse number 15. As for verse number 14, he doesn't actually mention who it was revealed about in this verse, but in upcoming verses he mentions that it was revealed about Uthman, as does Al-Burhan fi Tafsir al-Qur'an by Al-Bahrani. Okay, so if we go here really quickly to see verse number 15, what Mujahid says about it. Now, verse number 14, according to Muqatil, remember Muqatil is 150 after Hijrah. He says, قالت الأعراب آمنا, he says that it was revealed about أعراب جهينة ومزينة وأسلم وغفار وأشجع. So he says it was revealed about literally 5 tribes. He says كانت منازلهم بين مكة والمدينة. Their homes were between Mecca and Medina. فكانوا إذا مرت بهم سرية من سرايا النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم قالوا آمنا ليأمنوا على دمائهم وأموالهم. So he says, because they were in a central location between Mecca and Medina, whenever the armies of the Prophet would pass by, they would say, oh, we believe. Why? So that they can safeguard themselves and make sure that they're out of trouble. Okay? He says, وَكَانَ يَوْمَئِذٍ مَنْ قَالَ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ يَأْمَنْ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ وَمَالِهِ. But Allah alone, that would safeguard him from being attacked or being in war or in battle. He says, فَمَرَّ بِهِمْ خَالِدْ بْنِ الْوَلِيدِ. Khalid ibn al-Walid passes by فِي سَرِيَةٍ, in a troop, فِي سَرِيَةِ النَّبِي, in one of the Prophet's troops or armies, and he says, فَقَالُوا آمَنَّا, they said, oh, we believe. فَلَمْ يَعْرِضْ لَهُمْ وَلَا لِأَمْوَالِهِمْ. So they were protected, they were safe from him. فلما سار النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم إلى الحديبية. So when the treaty of Hudaybiyah occurred, واستنفرهم معه, and he asked them to come with him. فقال بعضهم لبعض, some of them said to each other, إن محمدا وأصحابه أكلة رأس أهل مكة. Muhammad and his companions, they are basically trying to control Mecca, right? To defeat Quraysh. وإنهم كلفوا شيئا لا يرجعون عنه أبدا. فأين تذهبون تقتلون أنفسكم? And they're charging themselves in doing something that's going to get them killed at the end of the road. So why do you want to go and get yourself killed? So this is a group of them. انتظروا, wait حتى ننظر ما يكون من أمره. Let's wait and see what happens with them. If everything works out okay, then we can be with them. If not, then not. فذلك قوله في الفتح بل ظننتم أن لن ينقلب الرسول والمؤمنون إلى أهلهم أبدا إلى آخر الآية in the chapter of Al-Fatih, right? So they say then, according to Muqatil, that it was revealed for this reason. Here he says, and therefore it was revealed about them. قالت الأعراب آمنا, the Arabs said that we believe, meaning that we believed in Islam and the Prophet and everything that he preaches. And then Prophet Muhammad is told, قل لم Ya Muhammad, say, O Muhammad, that you did not believe. لم تصدقوا, meaning تؤمنوا, ولكن قولوا أسلمنا, which means that we said with our tongues, we testified, and we submitted so that our wealth is safeguarded. لتسلم لنا أموالنا ولما يدخل الإيمان, meaning that faith never entered a state of belief and confirmation in your hearts. في قلوبكم. Okay. في قتال أهل اليمامة. Okay. So, all right. So here then we see that there's a difference in opinion in who it was revealed about. Let's see what Muqatil says about verse 15 and who it was revealed about. He says, ثم أخبر عن المؤمنين فنعتهم لقول هؤلاء الأعراب آمنا. So now he says He says, well, you know, in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it so that He can describe a certain group of Muslimin. فَقَالَ إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. And so He said, surely the believers, الْمُصَدِّقُونَ فِي إِيمَانِهِم, those who are true in their faith, الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا يعني صَدَقوا, which means that they truly followed the faith, not just lip service. بالله, in Allah, بأنه واحد لا شريك له, that there is no God but He, ورسوله, and His messenger is Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, أنه نبي رسول وكتابه حقه ثم لم يرتابوا, and then they didn't have doubt in their religion after their faith. وجاهدوا العدو, meaning that they stood against the enemy مع النبي, with the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, بأموالهم, with their wealth, وأنفسهم, and their health. يعني باشروا القتال بأنفسهم, meaning that by their own volition they stood by the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to spread Islam في سبيل الله, in the way of Allah. يعني في طاعة الله أولئك هم الصادقون في إيمانهم, those are the ones who are true in their faith. And he does not mention who it is that it was revealed about. All he says is that, you know, it was revealed about a group of the mu'mineen who were there. Mujahid doesn't even give a tafsir of this verse at all, right? Let's see what Al-Fayruz Abadi says. Al-Fayruz Abadi, about 15. Do I have everybody, or are you all asleep? Is this interesting to you? Do you want me to go on?
Yes, Sheikh. For me, it's interesting.
Okay. So we're almost done. We're almost done. We'll give it 3 minutes, Hajj Alex, and we're almost done, okay? I know some of you are yawning. Okay, let's see. So he says, he doesn't actually mention here all he says is it came out about Bani Asad, verse 14, okay, which is similar to what Mujahid said originally. He says here, فغلوا أسعار المدينة وأفسدوا طرقها بالعذرات وكانوا المنافقين يقولون. So here he describes Bani Asad as being those who were hypocrites, and they were creating havoc and problems for the people of Medina. And they said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Prophet, you know, is the one who graced us, you know, by bringing us to Islam, and we are sincere to him, and we are believers. But in reality, they were hypocrites, right, in their deen. This is why these verses were revealed. And then he says, ثم بين نعت المؤمنين. He then described what believers, what the attributes of believers actually are, and he reveals verse 15, إنما المؤمنون الذين آمنوا بالله ورسوله ثم لم يرتابوا. And then he says after that, he sticks with Banu Asad. That's what he sticks with, and he doesn't mention Imam Ali Salamullahi alayhi. Okay, so let's see now what Suyuti says, because now we've looked at Mujahid, who is, we said 104 AH. We looked at Muqatil, who is 150. We looked at Fayruz Abadi, who is 817. Let's see what Suyuti says here. And Suyuti is about, I mean, he's I think about 900 AH. We will look at one more from the Sunni school of thought. Suyuti is good to look at because he gives you all of the opinions of the Sunni scholars, right? So 14, for verse 14, he said it's about A'rab Bani Asad ibn Khuzaymah, same thing. And then he says Ibn Jarir said by way of Qatada that it was also about Bani Asad. And then Abd al-Razaq and Ibn Jarir and Ibn Munzir, by way of Qatada, say that it wasn't a generalization of all the Arabs, but it was a specific group or tribes of Arabs. And he says, وَلَكِنَهَا طَوَائِف, which means it wasn't just about Bani al-Asad alone. It seems to be more than one tribe, according to what he's saying here. And then he says, Abdul Hamid ibn Jarir, also on Qatada. He says, قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا. He said, لعمري ما عمت هذه الآية الأعراب. So this is just the narration of Qatada, saying that it didn't include all of the Arabs. And then he says, he gives the narration that al-Islamu iqrarun wal-imanu tasdiqun. he also gives the opinion of Zuhri in the ayah. He says that Islam is a word, while al-Iman is an action. Then he tells us that Bukhari and Muslim and Ibn Dawood and Nasa'i, Ibn Jarir and Ibn Mardaweh and Ibn Abi Shaybah, who are all high scholars in the Sunni school of thought, say that Sa'ad ibn al-Waqqas mentioned that a group came to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he basically told them to come with him. He said that some of them didn't. فقلت يا رسول الله أعطيهم وتركت فلان. أعطيتهم عفوا وتركت فلان. So he says the Prophet came. He basically gave them. I don't know what he gave them, but he left one person out. So Sa'ad ibn al-Waqqas, he says to the Prophet, well, why did you leave this person out? You gave all of them. He says, I swear by Allah, I do not see that he is a believer. So the Messenger of Allah then says, أو مسلم قال ذلك ثلاثا, or even a Muslim. And he repeated this 3 times. The same narration is also mentioned by Az-Zuhri by way of Ibn Qana ibn Mardaweh. At-Tabarani and Al-Bayhaqi say that in terms of Iman, it was revealed about Ali ibn Abi Talib, he says. He says, وَالْبَيْهَقِي فِي شُعَبِ الْإِيمَانِ عَنْ عَلِي ibn Abi Talib عليه السلام. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, الْإِيمَانُ مَعْرِفَةٌ بِالْقَلْبِ وَإِقْرَارٌ بِاللِّسَانِ وَعَمَلٌ بِالْأَرْكَانِ. Right? So Al-Bayhaqi and Al-Bayhaqi and Tabarani and Ibn Majah, as well as Ibn Mardaweh, they say that Ali ibn Abi Talib narrated, that Prophet Muhammad differentiated between Iman and Islam in the way that we mentioned before. And then Anas ibn Malik, by way of Prophet Muhammad, also narrates something similar about Iman being in the heart and that it has to show with your actions. Okay? Now, let's see. So we have here several opinions about verse 14. Verse 15 then, let's see what Suyuti says since he's given us all these opinions. He says, أخرج أحمد بن حنبل والحكيم and Tirmidhi and Abi Sa'id al-Khudri that the Prophet ﷺ said that the believers, المؤمنون في الدنيا على ثلاثة أجزاء, that believers are of 3 types in this world: those who believe in Allah and His Messenger, and then they do not have doubt, and they give themselves in the way of Allah in their wealth and in their health, and those who والذي, and basically he just repeats the verse. Okay, he doesn't really give you the opinions on why it was revealed and who was revealed about. Okay, so this is Suyuti. So far no one has given that this verse was actually revealed about Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullah alayhi, in describing him to be the true believer that is intended here first and foremost. Of course, Ibn Abbas does say, and Al-Hakim al-Hasakani, who are both, as I mentioned before, Ibn Abbas is a narrator that existed during the time of the Prophet. Both schools of thought take from him, and he says that there isn't a single verse that mentions al-Mu'minun except for Ali ibn Abi Talib, huwa amiruha, meaning that he's the prince of that verse, and he is the one that is intended first and foremost. And then he says the mu'mineen after him. Ibn Abbas says that verse 15, نزلت في ثابت بن قيس قوله للرجل الذي لم يفسح له ابن فلانة فقال رسول الله من الذاكر فلانة فقام ثابت فقال أنا يا رسول الله فقال انظر في وجوه القوم فنظر إليهم فقال ما رأيت يا ثابت ما رأيت يا ثابت قال رأيت أبيض وأسود وأحمر قال فإنك لا تفضلهم إلا في الدين والتقوى فأنزل الله سبحانه وتعالى في ثابت هذه الآية آمنوا إذا قيل لكم تفسحوا في المجالس فافسحوا. So يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى. عفوا, this is the reason for that verse. Then the verse that we're talking about, let's see. ألا منعني عن صلوات الخمس خلف كذا أين الغلام لصاحبه. Sorry, I'm just reading here the narration. And we're almost done. We're just finished this one. Okay, I'm not seeing it here, but maybe tomorrow, inshallah, I'll pull it out for you. So far then, we've gone through the Sunni opinions and the Shia opinions. Here I found, it says, نزلت في الأعراب الذين ذكرهم, this verse 14. It was revealed about the Arabs that were mentioned in Surah Al-Fath. Those are the Arabs of Muzayna, Juhayna, Aslam, Ashja', and Ghafar. They would say, we believe in Allah, and then the Prophet ﷺ would basically correct them because they ended up not going with him to Hudaybiyah. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, قالت الأعراب آمنا قل لم تؤمنوا ولكن قولوا أسلمنا. And then he says here, إن الإقرار باللسان وإظهار شرائعه بالأبدان. So he explains what Iman really is. And then he says, Abu Abbas says, Muhammad al-Marwazi, حدثنا كذا أخبرنا يونس عن الزهري. And let's see here, I think we've gotten to what we want here. The Prophet ﷺ was given so and so. Yeah, so he mentions that same narration by way of Sa'd ibn Waqqas about the person who was deprived of being given something by the Prophet. And he said, I didn't see him a believer, let alone a Muslim. Right, and then, okay, so here it is. He says, ثم بين حقيقة الإيمان. He showed the truth of Iman, and he mentions the verse, and it was revealed. Then he says, لا من أسلم خوف السيف, not he who says I'm Muslim fearing being killed by the sword of Islam. And when these verses were revealed, كذا كذا, again, it doesn't mention here. It doesn't mention that it was revealed about Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi. However, the Shia sources all say that it was revealed about Ali ibn Abi Talib salamullah alayhi. Okay. As now we have a very comprehensive view of everything till now, and tomorrow inshallah we start with the following verses, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us tawfiq to be able to finish them. Okay. Again, we go through the Shia sources and the Sunni sources so that we have a comprehensive understanding, right, of how the information is being delivered to us and what the sources actually are. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accepts what little we offered. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to be as He wants us to be, not as we want to be, unless it's how He wants us to be. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the tawfiq of pleasing Him and being under the flag of Al-Hujjah, all of us, under all of our maraja, inshaAllah. We ask that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to see the truth as the truth and falsehood as falsehood, and to follow the experts in teaching us and bringing us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين صلوات.